Thank you for watching Creative Backstories. My name is Kendall Brown, creative and entrepreneur. And I'm on a mission to inspire others through the power of creativity. Today I'm joined by Dr. Ashon Crawley, a writer, scholar, artist, and thinker whose work explores the deep connections between Black life, religion, sound, and identity. His ideas invite us to imagine new ways of being together that center creativity, liberation, and deep care. Enjoy the conversation.
What is bringing me joy in the moment is friendship, which is, it seems it's not a creative practice, but I actually think friendship is a deeply creative process because it's like people that you don't necessarily know, initially at least, and people who have various kind of life commitments and histories that through fate and intention, I don't even believe in fate, but some form of happenstance and also intention decide to produce the relationship called friendship and commit to it. And I recognize how much of what I do is because of friendship. And my relationships are the kind that really give my life meaning, and that they are the foundation of my, I think, creative pursuits. Because when I feel I have a prompt that I think is worth pursuing and I share it, and there's I know, because I can trust my friends, that maybe it's something I need to think more about. But more often than not, it's been encouragement to continue to pursue the thing that I'm sensing or feeling or thinking about. And I was at this residency for the past 2 weeks, and most of my reflection was one, on the work that I was doing, but two, the kinds of friendships that have walked with me throughout the making of this particular project. And so I think friendship is one of the primary things that brings me joy daily. I'm Ashon Crawley. I am a um, young person, middle aged, oh my gosh, from East Orange, New Jersey. I grew up. I think that there was one institution that is responsible for a lot of the ways that I am, both good and perhaps not so good. I was born and raised in the Black Pentecostal tradition, and it taught me a lot about mystery and the unknown and the sacred. It gave me a deep appreciation for music and musicality. And so I'm a person who really believes in, and it was a place too that encouraged, because there weren't a lot of us, it encouraged young people to do things, get involved, direct the choir, play the organ, play the piano, do well in school. Like, it always felt to me like a place that was encouraging, um, in some ways. And so a huge part of who I am in terms of the ways that I think, the forms of relationships that I try to pursue, and the kinds of practices that I try to engage artistically are because of my history in this Black Pentecostal Kojic church in New Jersey. And so I'm from New Jersey. My father is a pastor. My mother is in the Church of God in Christ language, an evangelist missionary, which means she preaches. My brother, I only have one sibling by my parents, I should say. I have many chosen. My one sibling from my parents was also a musician and a preacher in our church. I was planning to be a preacher and a singer and a choir director and a musician. I began to pursue a lot of these things in high school. What I did not recognize then, but I recognize now, is that I was cultivating different kinds of artistic practices that were deeply embedded in the pursuit of the spiritual. Um, and so, what I think of myself now in terms of my attempt to pursue the spiritual through creative practices, it is because Mother Spotwood Alice Franklin said, "You should do a service." And I'm like, I'm 10. What are you talking about? She gave my brother and I full reign. Like, you should sing songs, Ashon. And, the first concert was me singing a bunch of hymns that, a young person singing, like, Wounded for Me. Why are you singing this song? But but what I really love and appreciate is that she didn't tell us what to do, and she was very serious about it. And she gave us an offering afterwards. But the point, she was the pastor's aide president, and it was a fundraiser. It was like, well, this ain't raising that funds because it's, I got a good enough voice for our church. I don't got like um, but when my brother graduated and went to college, and I assumed the services would be over because they were annual. And she said, "No, you could do it by yourself." And I said, "Okay, I got ideas." And so I began to invite other people from other churches to um, participate. I would invite other young people, um, a person who's now pretty well known in the um, sort of worship music arena, Melissa Bethia, she was one of the people that I would invite to my concerts as a kid, and she would come. Her and her mom. And I think like one of the last time I would ask her and her mother to sing, and they both would sing. And then one year her mom was like, "No, Melissa, it could just be you." Um, but I think that was a kind of training too for Melissa. But she gave me creative control, and I learned a lot through a lot of failure, inviting people, and then people not showing up, and finding out, oh, you have to actually invite people through proper channels. And so my last concert that I had, I put together a little ensemble to sing, and we sang, but also I invited like a local community choir to sing, and they sang as well. And reflecting back on it, I'm like, oh, what I have always been doing is trying to gather other people that I think are better at the thing than I am, but can help me feel the thing that I want to feel when I'm trying to do the thing, but they can do it a little bit better or a lot better. And so even like the idea of gathering people is something that I was gifted because this church mother was like, make a service. And so like really having a deep, deep, deep appreciation for that kind of openness to young people, the real appreciation for young people, and not just the exploitation of young people, but really thinking that young people have something to contribute. And so each year when the concerts kind of changed just a little bit, um, she was very happy with it. I was very happy with it. Literally, more and more people started showing up to them. And I was really proud to say that I was doing these things. And they're still the kinds of things that I'm trying to do now, trying to gather people, trying to pursue um, the spiritual through artistic and gathering practices. And so who I am is, this person who believes deeply in relationships that you cultivate. I'm agnostic, but I also am very Pentecostal. So, as Kyle Brooks first called me, I'm agnosticostal, committed to, because, the pursuit of the unknown and the mystery, but without having to like answer, I don't care to answer it. Um, it's not like the God question isn't something I organize my thinking around, but um, being in relation with folks who do and who take God very seriously, I had to figure out a way, if I want to be in a relationship with these folks that I think are justice oriented, that I think are actually caring, that I think are not dogmatic in terms of like, well, you're just going to hell. People who have a similar kind of outlook on life, but are committed to God. Is there a way to be in a relation? And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's something that agnosticostalism um, gives me, because I take the spiritual very seriously. So, I'm a weird little person trying to figure out things and constantly trying to be in relation and trying to take seriously the various gifts that we all have and trying to bring everything together so that we can have a good time for the short amount of time we're here. My formative experience. So she was one of those people, and it took me a long time to figure it out, honestly. It was like, oh, this is someone I go to church with.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that I reflected on how generous it was. On the one hand, it's like you got two young people doing it, sure, but also it's actually still because if it wasn't good the first time or it wasn't good enough, she would have just asked somebody else to do it. Um, so it was generous, and so that incredible generosity, I'm really appreciative of. I don't know her name. I know what we call her. So Aunt Peggy, Aunt Peggy, uh, is someone who started attending our church as a well wisher. I don't believe she ever joined when
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid, and fellowshiped with, I think she was a member of an Episcopal church, and she started showing up because one of her friends was a member of the church, mother or sister at that time, Sister Ann Streeter. Sister Streeter was uh, the president of the youth department growing up, and I appreciate her, and she was very formative too, because like Mother Franklin, Sister Streeter was very much like, young people, y'all are in charge. Do the thing. And was very committed to kindness, which now I recognize as necessary. Then I didn't actually understand how kind she was as opposed to perhaps some other people. But she was very, very kind, and I really appreciate her. Her friend, who we call Aunt Peggy, was a well wisher. She would come, she would visit. Aunt Peggy wasn't the person she was never going to speak in tongues. She wasn't going to play a tambourine. She was probably going to, she would mock playing the tambourine, be like, y'all be beating the tambourine on your thighs. Love her. But she also would, like, my parents would go to the convocation in Memphis, and we stayed with her. We would stay with her.
Mm-hmm.
um, she would cook for us. She made sure we got to school. She was a deeply caring and open individual. And I will say that out of the folks that I attended church with, she's the first person that I said I'm gay. Now, it happened when I was in my full adulthood, but I wanted to go see her. And we had a long conversation, and she was just like, I don't know why everyone's so homophobic. It doesn't make any sense. People are who they are. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure she knew I was a little gay boy way back then and was thinking the same thing that she was thinking. She's formative because she and another person, Charlie, or what was her first name? This is gonna bother me because she used to make me. Um, there's another person, Shirley Waller. Uh, she would make me carrot cake with no frosting because I don't want the frosting. I just want the cake. She was an excellent cook. She was a member of the church kind of through her husband. Um, but she too wasn't a person that wasn't going to speak in tongues. She wasn't going to be running around the church. Some of the sort of embodied practices of Pentecostalism that sometimes are valorized as the only way to show that you are saved and sanctified. sometimes people who don't do those things are disparaged or dismissed or just not taken as seriously because it's like, well, y'all don't do it the right way. From these women, I learned actually no, that you can actually, and then you get older and you're like, actually, not to disparage other people, but actually, maybe they're the ones that are actually modeling a way to do to
Mm-hmm.
live one's true, authentic spiritual practice without demeaning other people. They never demean other people for doing it. But they also are just like, and we are here. We're here. We're not at another church. We are here with you. But also, we don't have to do that to be here with you, to enjoy the same things with you. And so I learned from them a practice of care that was rooted in being in community with people that also, but it wasn't like, and I have to do the same things that you do exactly the ways that you do it in order to
Mm-hmm.
express that I believe the same thing or that I care about the same. No, we can actually believe actually different things and still go to the same church. And that's
Right.
something very powerful that I didn't know that I was sort of experiencing as a young person. And Sister Waller, she passed away when I was 17, when I was away at a summer program. So I actually wasn't able to attend her funeral. It was actually really hard for me because I was just like, I don't even know what to make of, and I'm young. And so I didn't know what to make of the fact that she had passed away. But I knew that she was a great school teacher. All the kids loved her. And the folks at the church loved her because she was kind. And, because I was a little Pentecostal boy who was committed, I probably would have said back then, well, kindness isn't enough. You gotta be saved, sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost in the way that and I'm just like, yeah, but actually kindness probably is enough.
Fruits of
Fruits
the
of the
spirit.
Spirit.
So those are some of the formative people in my younger years. And then if
Okay.
I'm older, um one of the people I write about in this book about the Hammond is Bishop. I talk about Flunder meeting her in 2005 at Logan International and talking to her for like an hour because her bag was taking too long. And literally for the first time feeling like, oh, I can be a spiritual person and also gay. And like hearing her talk through not just spiritual, but like, I asked a question at this conference at Harvard in 2005, and I will never repost it because it's available online. But I said Kojic probably 30 times within the span of a minute. It was just like, I grew up Kojic and, the Kojic church and the Kojic sound and it was very, very, a lot of anxiety about Kojic. And
Mm-hmm.
it was very, but like I think she was able to sense that. It was the first time that I really had a conversation with someone who grew up in the same thing and understood the same people and the same rationalizations we make for pursuing misery as opposed to the sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a life altering conversation. Absolutely. And it's like it remains with me because I'm constantly like there are people that I say that had I not met them, I would be doing something else. And that was a consequential meeting and it was a consequential conference that I wrote. I was a musician for a Pentecostal church on 52nd and Parish in Philly at the time. And I wrote the pastor to say, and Bishop Yvette Flunders here. What you gonna say? And I wanted to see what she was gonna say. And she said, oh, that's nice. The things that you learn on it. And then another person is Lanice Pinkert because her sermons they altered my brain chemistry and helped me to really think about calling out empire all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes exhausting other people with it, but yet it's necessary. Um, and just really feeling like in this sermonic moment, there can be this uh, deep compassion and also this great anger, which and Fred Moten, I would say, is probably
Mm-hmm.
another person who's formative of more in my adult life, where this was a person who encouraged me to not write the dissertation that I told him I was going to write, and to write about Pentecostalism, which at the time made no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was actually really resistant to it because I didn't understand how I could be in an English doctoral program and write a project about Pentecostalism. Uh, I didn't have a secret Pentecostal project in mind when he told me you should write about Pentecostalism. He just was someone who was very attentive as a teacher and a mentor. And I always tell him, you were right.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, just like meeting Bishop at Logan, and I think it was like, Yes, I Am, which was Lanisa's sermon that you sent me. Um, and then meeting Fred and feeling like, and this is not the linear order because it would be Bishop, then Fred, and then the sermon, but
Mm-hmm.
um, meeting Fred was deeply, it was just like, oh, here's someone who knows how to pay attention to the things that you're saying, even against the things that you're saying. Like, I'm writing
Mm-hmm.
about the sound of the Underground Railroad, and he's like, no, you want to talk about Pentecostalism. And yeah, I mean, like the previous two, had he not said that, I would be doing something very different. I would not be. My first book is a consequence of that conversation. My second book is a consequence of that conversation. The art shows in Los Angeles at Yale, consequence of that conversation. The installation on the National Mall is a consequence. Everything literally kind of springs from this man saying, you should think about the thing that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And you should pursue that. It doesn't mean you can't be critical because that's all you are. But like, you can do that with the thing that you love. And I am deeply appreciative for that kind of teaching and care work. My earliest experiences with art was when I was a kid. I wanted to be little Bob Ross. I would watch The Joy of Painting. This is why we need a fun PBS, everybody. Who am
Mm-hmm.
I talking to? But I would watch The Joy of Painting almost every day. I just love between like the big reveal at the end and his calm voice. It was just something that I was like, oh, you can do this. Um, that you could create something that could look like something that people would appreciate. I also would watch. So everyone knows the joy of painting, but there were the other people who also painted on PBS. I would
Mm-hmm.
watch them, but not with the same regularity that I would watch Bob Ross. I also watched. Um, I think it's called Imagination Station, or no,
Mm-hmm.
Mark Kessler is this guy who drew a lot of things, and he would draw and talk about like perspective and shading. He taught kids how to draw, on PBS. Amazing series of shows. And I would watch, and it's all PBS, and I would watch all this stuff, and my imagination would be on fire, wanting to do things. And I'm thankful that in elementary school, public school in East Orange, New Jersey, we had an art teacher, Mrs. Holmes, disabled woman. Um, I don't know what her condition was, but she had mobility issues in terms of walking and with her hands as well. And yet she's like teaching us art. It was amazing, like things
Wow.
that you don't think about until you're an adult. You're like, oh, there's actually something really beautiful And she always encouraged us to think with our artistic minds. And one Christmas, I think I begged for paint for Christmas, and so my parents bought me an acrylic paint set, and I ran through it in like 2 days. But I made like 4 or 5 paintings. Um, Me trying to paint happy little clouds and trees and mountains that I'd never seen. But I was trying to do what I saw Bob Ross do. It's kind of difficult with acrylic paint. That's a different story, but I tried. And I remember taking them to school, and she said, "These are beautiful." And like, just as she said, keep doing this. Um, and so as a young kid, I really wanted to pursue art. Uh, Art is expensive, or there are different ways to think about it. There's found art, or there's like things that you can do with found objects, absolutely. But because I was not in a context where I was engaging artists who were doing that kind of work, I also didn't know that art could be something that could be produced by the things that you have around you. So because I didn't have that as an access point for thought, um, I wanted to do art, but I knew that you had to buy things, and I didn't have the things available to do the art, and so I would draw a lot, but not in a systematized way, and um, but my earliest sort of memory of it was, doing these paintings, really enjoying it, and hoping that I would get the opportunity to do something like it again. It was on a back burner, but again, like I didn't know that directing a choir is art. I actually really think that it very much is. I didn't have that as a kind of language performance practice as artistic practice. But I was directing choirs, and I was playing the organ for our church, ear trained. Um, I started playing at 14, and started a little choir at 17, and then started the New Spirit of Penn. I went to University of Pennsylvania for undergrad, started the gospel choir that now exists there, and was a musician for churches in Philly. I was working with sound for a long time, um, but I was also in the engineering department or the engineering school and doing terribly. I was doing terribly. It was awful. I just couldn't catch up to any of the work. I was not enjoying the work, and I was gay and didn't want to be gay. So there was a lot psychologically, emotionally, that was difficult in terms of adjusting to undergrad. And that made trying to do the schoolwork next to impossible. And the end of my third year, I got dismissed from the university for low grades. My grades were low. I couldn't even argue with them. It was so bad. But I begged to be readmitted, and I had a conversation with my father, and he said, "Why don't you try to major in something that'll make you happy?" I was like, "You can do that? What are you talking about? Major in something that makes you happy? I'm supposed to get a job with a lot of money. Why would I be?" And he suggested music, and because my high school math teacher, she taught us pre-calc and calculus. She would always say, "I went to undergrad initially for music," and I said, "This is too hard. Let me major in something easy." And she chose math, and we all said, "What is wrong with you?" But I said, music is not going to be the thing if I want to graduate, because that's going to be hard. But I'd always been very interested in architecture. Knew very little about it. I knew that they built things, or I knew that they designed things to build. And one reason I knew is because the Brady Bunch, because the father was an architect, and I still remember the one time he designed a building, and it was for a makeup baroness, and the building that he designed was a compact that opened. It was silly, but it's lodged in my head as like,
Yeah.
oh, I can make creative things too. Um, and so I said, what if I like take some architecture courses, take some photography courses? Um, and so I wrote up a plan to take photography and architecture, and it mostly worked. But I ran into the same problem I ran into when I was a kid, which is it's very expensive.
Hmm.
It was more expensive than I could have imagined. And so I took a year sequence of the architecture courses and I took a year sequence of the photography course at the same time. Great idea, terrible idea, or great idea, expensive idea. Um, I was paying for all kinds of paper, pencils, plexiglass, wood, and I was essentially self-funding my undergraduate studies at the time. So I was broke. And so I knew that I wouldn't be able to continue to do that for a second. I would have needed to do it for 2 years. Um, and so I switched out of those courses. I got like B pluses, A minus in my second architecture course. Was doing well. Um, and then I switched out of it and decided to take courses in urban education. So I started writing a great deal and loved the writing. And so I put the visual on the back burner again and started pursuing it when I moved to Charlottesville. So if I put that on the back burner in like 2002, I moved to Charlottesville in 2017. That's a long 15-year period of nothing. Um, but it feels like it always just comes back. So I was unprepared for the places it would go. Honestly,
Hmm.
I just had a series of ideas in 2010. Um I was having boy trouble, child. When am I not? And I was, love sick over some young person who I'm so glad. What's the song say? God blocked it. I don't even believe whoever blocked it. Man, I'm so glad. Um, well, but like before the I'm glad was a lot of sadness, and I like had things that I thought I wanted to say. Just like, oh, I went to a mountain today. And the mountain was beautiful, and I was like, but I can't email this person who's not responding to me. Um, and so she said, email yourself. I was like, great idea. So I started emailing myself a bunch of just meditations on music and spirituality. And she sent me a video in 2010 of a little girl. She was 3 years old at the time. So she's old now. Wow. She's like in her 20, 25. But she was 3 years old at the time. And she was an abstract painter. And she started clapping her hands over
Hmm.
the canvas with blue paint on her hands. And I wrote a letter to myself um, about an artistic practice where I'm listening to Pentecostal shouting music and clapping my hands with paint on them to the rhythm of the shouting music. And I wrote a series of letters about this kind of artistic practice that I'd never done. And then I forgot about it. I now think that most of my life is we're putting the foundation in for something that come later. So just now is not for now. And I didn't know that then, but that those letters weren't for then. It was for 2017. And so when I moved to Charlottesville, I had a lot of recreation time that I didn't have when I was in Los Angeles. And um, I said, well, it was a couple of different things. The book had come out, Black Pentecostal Breath had come out, this, and I didn't want to read from it. So I started reading these letters, not even serious. I was just like, I've written about that. I'm just going to read these letters. So I started reading these letters, and someone said, "Oh, you should like try to publish these." I said, "No, I shouldn't." And then they said, "No, you should." And so I started a conversation with people about publishing it, and the first iteration of it had no art in it because I wasn't in Charlottesville. Moved to Charlottesville, have recreation time, and I said, "Oh, maybe you should try to do the thing that's in the letter that you wrote about doing this thing." So I read the letter and I started trying to clap my hands to the rhythm of shouting music with ink on my hands. And from that first experiment, a lot has grown. Um, because I didn't know if it would make sense to me. And then if it did make sense to me, I didn't know if it would make sense to other people. But I was going to do it regardless. That's me. And so I started doing a series of just these paintings with me clapping to whatever praise breaks I could find on YouTube. And then I purchased a tambourine. And I lived in an apartment then. And I'm sure my neighbors were like, what is going on? Because I would play the tambourine in my living room with shouting music on in my headphones. And I would just play it and just let the paint splatter. And I had written about shouting with paint, but I hadn't done it.
Mhm.
And I used a video that you sent me, Dancing in One Spot, Bishop
Mhm.
Robert Evans. I really loved the idea of dancing in one spot. He talks about growing up in a storefront church, and he said you didn't have space to, people run around all the time in these bigger churches. He said we didn't have that kind of space. So you had your spot, and you had to, whatever your praise was, you had to limit it to that small area. I think that's like really beautiful and very black. It's
Mhm.
very black because that's what black people do. We feel the constraint and we like do all this beauty within the context of the constraint. And so I use that as like the soundtrack for me to try to, and the series is called Dancing in One Spot. But initially I was using like acrylic paint. Awful idea because it's slippery. And I was like slipping and I almost fell multiple times. And I said, this can't work. So I started using pigment powder. And once I started using pigment powder, um, with a little bit of paint, it worked really well. And so I would do these praise paintings, these shouting paintings, and it would take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to do one. But I would, shout, I would pour the pigment powder, and I would um, sweat, and then take a rest, and then start doing it again. And it just opened up a different way for me to think about um, spirituality. It opened up a different way for me to think about um, how to pursue relation with people who believe differently than you do. That the desire was to show what Pentecostal praise looks like when the praise has ended. Is there like a residue? Is there a remainder? And I wanted to like visualize the remainder, and so I started doing these visual things with paint, with ink, with pigment powder to visualize that remainder. And I could not have at all anticipated the um one how it changed the way that I thought about my own practice and process of writing. Um, I had to change all the letters that were about painting because it was all wrong. But I'm glad that I wrote it because it was like the prompt to try to do. So it ended up being like a prompt as opposed to prescriptive. Um,
Mhm.
And it taught me that what you should do is write prompts instead of prescriptions. Um, and it it gave me a deep appreciation for like what artists do. Um, that the performance practices actually are very taxing and require a lot of the body. Um, and yeah, it began this kind of deeply interdisciplinary project, which allowed me to return to a lot of the things that I thought I needed to give up because I left church. I'm more comfortable with it now than I was growing up culture. It's just like you leave it, but you don't recognize how it shapes the way that you think about thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like in this book that I'm writing, I'm talking about this church where they engaged in mediumship practices weekly. It's just like
Yeah.
people talked because the spirit isn't born, the spirit doesn't die, the spirit continues. And it took a long time for me to just accept it on its own terms, as opposed to me saying, well, I'm not going to try to think about it. I'm not going to try to write about it. And it wasn't even intentional. It was just like, oh, okay, whatever. And like not even trying to sit with what it is that they're saying. Still being able to think about it was like it's like a different thing. And it felt like a different register. Um, and I'm comfortable now with just accepting that, no, you are constantly being visited and that what they are doing and quantum mechanics kind of could confirm this, that not only are particles entangled across space, and so what happens to one
Mm-hmm.
particle happens to another particle, but it's like this weird way that things are entangled across time because time is just space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm moving backwards to Mamie Till, I suppose, but in the book that I'm writing, I use a phrase from Infinite World. And I get the phrase from Infinite World because one of the things the mediums would say as they are announcing a message is, I hear a voice from Infinite World. And I read the phrase the first time and I was stunned. Captures it. It's beautiful. It is poetic. It's precise. And it feels right. And it has to be, because one of the reasons we in all this mess is because we have given up. And so I hear a voice from Infinite World resonated so deeply within me that it changed the title of the book. It was supposed to be this other thing, but no, it's from Infinite World. But I'm like, it's not just voice from Infinite World. It is vibration, which captures all that is. It's voice, it's sound, it's movement. And to be able to sense uh, from Infinite World means that it exists outside time, which I'm like, yeah, I feel today like, no, I was prompted towards things as a young person that I'm finally able to understand today because they sent it then. But then is also this weird kind of now. And this happened to me when I had this elaborate dream about Mamie Till and kind of woke up and I started writing. Lost the thing that I wrote, literally could not find it, and I rewrote the entire thing. And I said, well, this wasn't me. I couldn't have done. I felt like I was a conduit for uh, the voice from Infinite World to let it happen, and it has deeply informed how I think about the pursuit of music. That sometimes what we are doing is we are sensing from some world beyond that is also here, that is constantly informing and helping us to pursue if we are open to it. And so Mamie Till is not anyone that I'm even loosely related to, but she is someone who I have felt has spoken with and through me um, deeply. And also my grandfather, who I didn't know, Thomas Crawley. People say they say, he was a little bit annoying because, if you had a question, he always had a scripture response. Always. And I don't think of myself in that way. But the annoying part, I can see. I can, I want to be thoughtful, like in the ways that I've heard that he was thoughtful. Um, we would very likely disagree about a lot of things. Um, but I think the thoughtfulness and the intention with listening is probably something that his practice of it shaped me. Um, and I feel like this current book that I'm writing, it was a combination of people who were constantly sort of working in through and with me and like pushing me, and also making sure the book wasn't done until I had found certain things. There were things that have been consequential for the book that I did not find until August of this year. I wanted to be done with the book in May. I was done, I was tired, but there were things that I'm very, very clear that were not in the book, that needed to be in the book. And until I found those things that were kind of there, they were waiting for me. But until I found it, the book was not going to be done. And I was trying to blame publisher, trying to blame blame can go around. But I think regardless, what was happening was there was a no. They were just like, nope, haven't you haven't found us. I found images that nobody knows exist, which is wild because it was like a weird Google search that led me to, that led me to, that led me to. And it was after I found these images that things literally started to close up like, okay, we are. And I said, all right, well, I guess this is what I was. This is what I was. And so I feel like I'm constantly being informed by some voice from Infinite World. And this began, as far as I can tell, way back when I was a kid. I used to sleepwalk a lot. And my parents tell it that when I was 4 and my maternal grandmother passed away. I got up out of bed the night before the night leading to the funeral, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. I get out my bed. I walk to the threshold of their door. I said, "We can make it." Turn around, went to sleep. I don't remember it. But my parents said, we needed to hear that. And now I recognize that my mother was like 29. So, age has a way of like putting things in real perspective. Like, I don't want to infantilize people, but you're a baby. You're still young. To have to deal with that kind of loss as a young person is hard. And like 4 years old walking through, like, literally, it could not have been me. My parents they were stunned, and and I just walked back to my bed and slept. And it's a story that they've had to tell me because I wouldn't be able to remember. And I wrote in the book that I remember how this felt, but I don't remember it at all. And I feel like learning the phrase "I hear a voice from Infinite World" actually gave me a language for what was happening. But I think that children are actually really, really open to that possibility, and that we constantly shut children down from that possibility, and so they feeling it, they stop sensing it because it's treated so negatively so very often. I also, I try to be honest. And it led to a whole lot of crying. It led just
Yeah.
like a lot of crying. Like,
Yeah.
this don't feel good. And like trying to be honest with the people that you love, like, look at how we acted. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm an abolitionist, so I'm very clear on like what even the politics of revealing mean. Like, it's not like the point is to point to y'all and say, look at how terrible you are. It's like, no, look at how terrible we have. We
Yeah.
all can be this terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all have to collectively make other kinds of. And so the point is like, we have to end this as opposed to, well, if we just call out the right people. And so, I'm grateful. I feel like I've been a conduit for something. And my real hope is that other people are like, okay, like you were saying with people coming to the candle making workshop and saying, I'm going to start a book club. Um, that this is like, okay, now I can do something
Mm-hmm.
in relation to and greater than this. Like, that is for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's always the point. It's not like this, it's like, what can we do other than this? I think that homegoing was probably the thing. Because it felt like a crystallization of what I was trying to say. Homegoing as this sonic memorial installation sculpture that whose intention it was to honor the musicians, singers, and choir directors who worked for Black churches and died of AIDS complications that were not given homegoings.
Mm-hmm.
It it was a combination of sound and movement, and the sound was intentional. Working with the artist Jerome Ellis to create strings for these two slow movements, while I improvise on the Hammond, um, in three different sections: sanctuary or procession, sanctuary, and benediction. Um, the first section, Sanctuary, being this 14-minute song where I whisper the names of about 300 people, men, who died of AIDS complications, Black men. And Jerome is playing strings and I'm playing the Hammond. The names were
Yeah.
gathered from the journal titled, you're gonna have to edit because I can't remember. What was the name of the journal? The name of the journal was something. I have to find it. I can see it, but I can't. The journal was released in 1993, and the first 5 pages were just literal names of the Black men who were friends of and acquaintances of the editors for the journal.
Mm-hmm.
And I use those names, and then I use the names of musicians, singers, and choir directors I know, interspersed with the names from this journal. And so people were reticent.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of history that sometimes people don't want to engage. Some people
Mm-hmm.
just submit names, and so those names were included. I only used the first names of people because I wanted to still have some form of anonymity, for the folks who would be named. But yeah, it was 14 minutes, and people could sit on the platforms and listen to all 14 minutes, which a lot of people actually did. And then they could move to the second section, which was titled Sanctuary. And Sanctuary was composed, in terms of the physical structure, it was composed of platforms that above head, if you look, it was an Arabic word, Amin, which means let this prayer be accepted. So as people move through the various maze-like qualities of the sanctuary section, they were actually moving through a prayer of affirmation in Arabic. It was purposeful because one of the things I'm arguing is that there's a deep relation between Black Islam and Black gospel music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there were 4 songs that I composed for the sanctuary section for a choir to sing, and the 4 songs were composed using keywords that I chose 3 musicians as my sort of sonic foundation, and I took songs from them and I chose keywords from their songs to build 4 new songs around, and I
Mm-hmm.
took common chord changes from their songs to build new songs based melodically and harmonically on their music. And so those songs were written to and for the musicians and not written to or for or about God. And that was intentional too, even though the songs sounded like songs you would hear on a Sunday morning during a church service. And then the final section, Benediction, was also composed with Jerome Ellis playing strings. They played the strings, and then I played the Hammond. I was improvising on the Hammond, and I used words from my second book, The Lonely Letters, taking the same keywords from that were the foundation for the 4 songs. I found those keywords in the actual book, The Lonely Letters, and I read passages from The Lonely Letters that used those keywords. Um, and I'm most proud of that because one, it seemed like it was not going to be possible
Yeah.
to create an installation that had 3 different sculptures and 3 different sound signatures, um, and working with a choir in less than 8 months. It was a lot of work. Um, but I
Mm-hmm.
think what I was able to do working with others was really try to lean into the fact that it wasn't me, trying to work with what I was sensing, and being very clear that it wasn't for me, it was for the folks that I'm trying to honor. And it combined the sound, it combined a lot of or it brought together the ways that I think about sound and the ways that I think about spirituality and the ways that I think about cross spiritual or cross religious, not just dialogue, but relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And also the pursuit of beauty. I wanted it to be beautiful. I didn't want it to just feel like it was thrown together. I wanted it to be stunning. And so people would see it from afar and would walk to it just because it's this big blue thing coming out of the National Mall, which is really close to, you could see the Washington Monument directly
Yeah.
behind it and the Black Smithsonian directly diagonal to it. And so wanting it to be a thing that uh, people would notice, but it was also a thing that if you weren't close to it, you didn't know that was making sound. And so you had to
Right.
be
Right.
in close proximity to the different sections to hear what was playing in the different sections. And that was a theoretical um, process for me because one of the things a lot of the folks were refused as they were dying was proximity. People refused
Mm-hmm.
to go to hospitals, refused to go to hospice care. If you want to hear, you have to be in it. And
Yeah.
so we used I work with a great sound engineer, and he found these surround sound speakers for the outdoors. I don't know how it works, but it worked. Like if you were in the middle of sanctuary, you couldn't hear what was happening in procession, and if you were in benediction, you couldn't hear sanctuary. So that was very intentional. Like you had to be in it to really feel it. I would say literally just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the hunch that you have is the hunch that you have, and think of it as an experiment. All of them ain't gonna work out, but you know, if it gives you an opportunity to think more deeply, even about process, it's always worth it. Um, my my pursuit as an adult began because I literally was just like, I wonder what would happen if,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of where everything is at this point. I wonder what would happen if X. And so I encourage, and I also say, if I've been able to do what I've been able to do with, loose training, very loose, um, then anyone, and that's not to disparage what I'm doing. It's because that's false humility. I don't believe in it. Like, I like the stuff that I do, but I would like it if nobody else, because like I did it, it's mine. But it's just to say that if I can do it, I'm always like, the point is to show that you could do it too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I could get an artist residency, I didn't know what an artist residency was when I applied for one. I thought I was gonna have to find my own housing, and I emailed them to ask them about the housing, and they said no. But like, I still got accepted. So like, I feel that the only way to satisfy the curiosity is to pursue the curiosity.
Yeah.
And you might be prompted and feel more, or you might be prompted to change directions, but the creative pursuit is always going to remain with you, even if you change direction. So just do it.